What are the great centers of Buddhism in Orissa? We have discussed till now the prevalence of Buddhism in Orissa in the early Christian era, as we know from traditions recorded in Buddhist literature about Tosari. Tosari is one name of a part of ancient Orissa. Tamralipti, known as Cheli Talo Pusi Poki Li, Cheli Taso Poshi Poki Li, as mentioned, this name was given by the Chinese pilgrim Wan Chuang, means Huan Sang, when he visited Orissa in 7th century AD. Ratnagiri, Jairam Bihar were other great centers of Mahayana Buddhism. In the early centuries of Christian era, the Buddhist ruins at Ratnagiri, Udaygiri and Lalitgiri in Jajpur district provide very many important evidences to show that the monastic establishment in this area hills started during this time and even before that, to show that the monastic establishment in these areas started at least from the 5th, 6th century AD. The Memoirs of the Archaeological Survey of India, number 44, has published the fragmentary inscription in the cursive Gupta script in 5th and 6th century AD. This indicates that the place existed as a Buddhist tantric establishment in the Gupta period. Scholars opine that both Hinayana and Mahayana have joined at some places or prevailed separately some places and prevailed side by side in Orissa. By the 1st century AD, these two forms of Buddhism that grew out of primitive Buddhism became antagonistic to each other. Buddhism, however, flourished from the beginning of the 7th century AD. This has been attested by several evidences. It is not that we propose a theory and there is no logic behind it. There are several evidences to prove that Buddhism flourished from the 7th century AD in Orissa. I told you about the Bhaumakara rulers. They are using the titles known as Parama Tathagata. Tathagata is another name of Buddha. Parama Tathagata and Parama Saugata. It is also Parama Ananda, and it means to obeisance to Lord Buddha. Now, during this period, in the Bhaumakara dynasty period, 7th century to 9th century AD, there was a king called Shivakara Unnata Singha. Shivakara Unnata Singha sent an autographed manuscript of Buddhist work, which is known as Gandhabvyo, to Taiwan, to China, not Taiwan, to China. And this Gandhabvyo was sent by the Bhaumakara ruler to the Chinese emperor Sejong, who received it in 795 AD. The great monastery of Ratnagiri became the center of Buddhist religion, learning, Tantra and Yoga. The Buddhist ruins at Ratnagiri, Radhanagar, Tapur, Kayama, Languri, in Lalitgiri, in the district of Jajpur provide measuring evidence to show that monastic establishments in these places flourished during the Gupta and the post-Gupta period, as archaeological excavations suggest us. Huenshan, the Chinese pilgrims, visited Odisha in the 7th century AD. His vivid account of Buddhism at that point of time, according to Huenshan, the Chinese traveler, it was a wonderful country, Odisha. He described in his book, Huenshan, it was a beautiful country, and when he was telling about Odisha, he was referring to a word, Ucho. And this Ucho is identified with Udro, another name of Odisha in earlier time. He spoke about a mantra, he spoke about hundreds of Sangharamas and 1,000 priests, and they are all studying Mahajana, the great vehicle. He spoke about a monastery at Puspagiri also, is another part. It is known as Pusipokili. The stupa belongs to it, which exhibited many spiritual wonders. The pilgrim made us to believe that Puspagiri was a great center of learning like Nalanda or Bikramshila. Huenshan gives description of the city of Chelitalo or Chitrotpala in Odia, situated on the southeast frontier. Uchu described all those things in his travelogue. And this Puspagiri, he wrote, was a great center of learning like Nalanda and Bikramshila. Huenshan gives description of the city of Chelitalo, situated on the southeast frontier of Uchu, is practically known as Tamralipti, on the border of the ocean. The place is being identified as Chitrapur, and the present present day Chitrapur is present day Puri, has been identified by Alexander Cunningham, a great Indian scholar. He's a German scholar, but wrote about India. These are the pictures of the great Buddhist center in Odisha, Lalitgiri, Ratnagiri and Udayagiri. Lalitgiri is probably the greatest Buddhist settlement in the world. It has a large temple, monastery and stupa with relics of the Buddha. There are some relics of Buddha enshrined there. Odisha, as a great center of Mahayana Buddhism, is believed to have been the cradle of Vajrayana Buddhism or Kalachakrayana school of Buddhism. For Vajrayana Buddhists, Padmasambhava is a second Buddha, the foremost of all the great saints of Mahasiddhas. He is believed to have been born in Odisha, and he studied at the Ratnagiri Mahavihar. Later he studied in Nalanda for a considerable period, and he is believed to have been the founder of Tibetan Buddhism. But we find Padmasambhava founded many academic institutions, and he was instrumental in propagating Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet. Padmasambhava founded many academic centers to teach theory and practice of Vajrayana and the school of Nyingmapa, or Ancient Ones, a branch of the survivors, or Sravastivada order, branch of the Sravastivada order of Buddhism in Tibet. Padmasambhava, his name Pema Lungne in Tibetan, has been acknowledged as a second Buddha after Shakyamuni. Padmasambhava is iconographically pictured on the train in different forms of Buddhism. He is described as the second Buddha after Shakyamuni. Padmasambhava is iconographically pictured in the form of Vajradhara or Vajrasattva in the Odeon area described as Odisha. Now, we find the representation of Padmasambhava in Odishan architecture also, and that is why we find, because he is Padmasambhava, that is why we find maybe many Buddhist figures, were from that name, because his name was Padma. Padma is the lotus. Padmasambhava. So many people, they used to eat from the Padma leaves. Now, we find representation of Padmasambhava, who is decided, who is thought to be a second Buddha in Tibetan Buddhism. Archaeological evidences confirm that Buddhism was introduced in China sometime during the Han Dynasty. However, it did not flourish until the 6th dynasty's period, that is 220 to 589 AD. The first known Mahayana scriptural texts were translated into Chinese by the Kushana monk Lokhema in Laoyan between 178 to 189 AD. Early translators faced the difficulty of communicating to foreign Buddhist concepts to Chinese, and they often used Tao terminology to explain them. However, the later translators, such as Kumarabija from 334 to 413 AD, improved the translation methods of Chinese Buddhism considerably. In the 5th century, Chinese Buddhists also developed a new school and new tradition, such as Tiantai school, the Ved school, the Pure Land school, and Chan Buddhism. These are the new concepts, new schools and traditions started in Buddhist followers or Buddhism in 5th century AD. Buddhism continued to grow during the early Tang dynasty, which was from 618 to 907. It was during this dynasty that the Chinese monk Huensang, about whom we have referred to earlier, Huensang traveled to India, bringing back with him 657 Buddhist texts, along with the relics and statues. He established a famed translation school in Tang, capital of Chang'an, which is today's Xi'an. It focused on Yogacara school text. It was during this period we find there has been an introduction of esoteric Buddhism in India. Sorry, introduced in China from India. The Shang dynasty also saw the growth of Chen Buddhism, and with the great Zen Buddhism, Zen masters, in the latter part, Shang's Chinese Buddhism suffered a setback during the great anti-Buddhist persecution of 845. During the San dynasty, 960 to 1279, which is known as the Golden Age of Chans, during this period, Chinese Chan influenced Korean and Japanese Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, and became a popular religion during this period, and was then often predicted together with Chan. It was also during that period, Shang dynasty, that the entire Chinese canon was printed using over 130,000 wooden printing books. So in my subsequent lecture, I will be telling you about the spread of Buddhism in Vietnam and in Taiwan.